Hey friends, it's Leithia from Farm View Creators. Today we're going to work on the Nativity barn quilt ladder pieces. There are 4 designs and I got these from Talara Parrish's book, Barn Quilt Addiction, The Therapy Continues. I love her books. I set up on my 12 by 12 boards. I used Kills on them to prime them after I sanded each ACM piece, and then I drew out the patterns using erasable colored pencils. And now I'm using frog tape with my tape dispenser, which makes things a lot easier and faster, to tape up each line, and I'm making sure that I am on the line or slightly to the outside edge of each line when I tape. And then I'm going to go color by color and paint them across all 4 pieces. So any piece that has that color, I paint them across all before I move on to a new color. And as I'm painting, I first use a thin layer and brush down the side of the tape. That puts in the locking system on frog tape. Also, you try to paint away from the edges of the tape, especially corners and stuff. I'm also using my Work Pro utility knife to cut away anywhere where the tape overlaps for a color. That way I can paint more in a taping. And I do use both sides of the frog tape as much as I possibly can. Anywhere you have to cut away, you just want to make sure that you have unpainted tape in that spot. Here I tried canvas tan and didn't feel like it had enough color difference from gatherings, which was on the cross, so I switched it out for, I believe, changing seasons. All of the colors are listed in the description, and there you can see that I keep track of all the colors that I use in a notebook. I do this for all barn quilts. That way, if someone wants me to replicate, or when I get to the touch-up portion, I can look back on that and see exactly what colors I used. This really helps a lot, especially for this project because it had so many colors. So I listed out by the pattern what colors I used as I went. And I did do 2 layers of each color. I usually like to let things air dry with barn quilts, especially outdoor ones. However, because this one had so many small pieces, I did use my dryer. Sometimes that will make your latex paints split, especially if your layer is too thick. So you just have to make sure that you have super thin layers when you are planning on using a drying tool and force drying anything. So again, you can see I'm using 2 sides of the tape and cutting away anywhere where the tape is gonna kind of fall in to the pattern. And sometimes I cut away tape I don't need to, and I just throw another piece of tape on top of that and I go. Especially on those sheep, there were several places where I miscut and had to go back and fix it. Or I pulled up the opposite of what I needed to pull up on some pieces that needed to stay. So it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. I also, here on the 3 Wise Men, I forgot to paint their hands when I was painting their faces. So I'll go back in and freehand those later. And I put the wrong color on the wrong Wise Men for the hands, and I just use a baby wipe and wipe that up and move on to the correct color. As you can see here, I'll just kind of put my used tape off to the side until I know if I'm going to use it or not. Once I've used it twice, it goes in the trash. Or if it's too small of a piece, or I've kind of cut away an irregular shape, sometimes I won't even bother trying to use that again. But I love, love, love these barn quilts, and I love the ladder. My sister-in-law gave me the ladder for Christmas last year, along with several of the 12 by 12 ACM pieces from Piedmont Plastics. And I just think they are so fun to create. I'm actually planning on taking this set and flipping them over, and on the back side I am going to do 4 different snowflake patterns. That way it'll be reversible, and I'll have my Christmas and my winter design. I have had 4 different flower patterns up, so on the back side of that one, I'm going to do a fall set, and then I'll have something to flip for every season of the year, and I'm super excited about that. Here you'll notice on the left side that there is a little bleeding. I don't worry about touch-ups until I have completely finished painting all the different colors, because a lot of times something that you think needs to be touched up right away will actually be corrected on its own as you add more colors to the pattern. And you'll see that that happens in quite a few places. You can also, kind of put your tape a little bit further at a different angle, sometimes things like that, to correct those things that might have needed to be touched up. Here you can see I have a post-it note up there with what colors I wanted for the shepherd's outfit. I did this on Mary and Joseph and the 3 wise men, just because as I was looking through what paint colors I had, I was trying to match up what I wanted, and I wanted to remember that when it got time to painting. I tried to make all the decisions on what colors each piece is going to be before I even start painting at all. That just helps speed the process up and keep me on point with what I'm supposed to be doing. As you can see, when you're painting barn quilts, especially ones as in depth as this with such an intricate picture, there is a lot of repetition. I mean, it's paint, tape, paint, repeat, over and over with each color. I try not to pull up any tape until that paint is completely dry, and at that point you know if you need a 3rd layer or not. Most of the time it is going to be 2 layers of paint for each color. A lot of times on reds or maybe a dark blue, sometimes even your lightest colors, it might take 3 or more coats, especially reds. Reds are so tough. At this point in my painting, I try to avoid reds at all cost because they do take a while, lots and lots of coats. But my advice is to use a base coat with a little bit of gray in it, and that speeds up the process. But just a lot of repetition, just working your way through it, trying not to rush, and just taking it step by step. Here, as I was pulling off the tape for the wise man, I realized that I had never painted his gold. So I had to go back in with that. I try to do everything that is the same color at one time, but everybody makes mistakes. Another tip that I have is to always have either Clorox wipes or baby wipes on hand, because a lot of times if your paint is still wet, you can kind of rub it up if you've made a mistake using either of those. They are just super handy to have around. Y'all, I love this blue so much. It is my favorite, that Midnight Dreams. It's just such a muted navy blue, and I've almost used up my entire container of it. It's a good thing I have a second one on hand. So here I'm taking off that final taping, and we will be heading into touch-ups. And I have gotten to the point where I freehand my touch-ups. I use a very fine tip brush, and I usually use, it's just a very small round tip. Sometimes I will go in and use a small flat brush for touch-ups. And then sometimes I'll wipe them away and go at it from a different angle, and it'll look better. And you'll see that I'll wrap the baby wipe around my finger and kind of brush along edges. So I'm consulting my book with all of my paint colors and just trying to figure out exactly where I should start with my touch-ups and just working my way through. And I'll hold it up at different angles and just verify that I've got everything I need of each color before I move on to a new color. So there I needed to wipe up and correct a little bit, which is fine. And then moving on to the next color. I'll just keep doing this until I've gone through all of the colors across all of the boards. And I did have to, bring out some of the colors a second time because I missed a spot. Because like I've said, these are very in-depth, intricate pictures for a barn quilt. They're not normally this in-depth. will also say that on some of these touch-ups, I could have gotten by without doing anything on them, because when it's hanging on the ladder and you're looking at it from a distance, you would have never seen that there was just a tiny little sliver of space between the two paint colors. But I'm a little extra and I want it to be perfect, or as perfect as it can be, even though I know that things that are hand painted are never going to be perfect. But I tried. Also, I use the same brush for most of these touch-ups, and I would just wipe it off with a baby wipe between colors. And most of the time, I would do 2 coats on my touch-up, but I didn't really and truly allow it full dry time. Maybe I used kind of a heavier hand for that, but it worked. And I'm sure you saw where I did the wrong color on the wise man's hand and had to wipe it off and fix it. It's another reason I love having baby wipes on hand. Here I am using a 5-inch foam roller and I'm adding on my water-based spar urethane. You don't have to use the Minwax brand, but it does have to be water-based. And then I'm pouring it back in there. I put my foam roller in a plastic baggie and then put it in a airtight box. And here it is out on my porch. I love, love, love how it turned out. Let me know what you think and be sure to like and subscribe this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.